So, DeVos Children's Hospital is now limiting visitors due to a pneumonia-like illness. China and India, unfortunately, are seeing an uptick in that same illness. And dogs are, I guess, experiencing an illness too that's spreading. Here in Michigan, it's been reported. So, basically, round two, right? Election year is coming up. And so we have to have an election year variant, but you know, fool me once, shame on you, fool me twice, shame on me. So, thank you guys for joining me. Welcome back to Michigan Muckraker. My name is Michelle. Today is the 4th of December of 2023, and there is a ton of news items that I need to share with you, of course. I want to talk to you about Marshall, the Ford Marshall EV plant being rated, or rather voted, the worst economic development deal of 2023 by the Center for Economic Accountability. And of course, I got to talk about gun grabs again, because it's not just Whitmer that's trying, but the Democratic Party in the federal government is trying to pass a new gun bill, and it's coming after the semi-automatic handguns. So unfortunately, we have to keep our eye out on that as well. What else we have? Of course, we have some news on following along with we have a gun buyback program here in Michigan I want to discuss with you. And lastly, Christian school to hire anti-Christian teachers. The government is trying to force a school to hire who the government wants them to hire, and they're fighting back. So we're going to jump in. I want to thank you very much for joining me. I hope that you had a great weekend. Here in Michigan, the weather hasn't been too bad. Friday night had a snowstorm, but it is December now, and so unfortunately it snows here in Michigan. Maybe that'll change. According to the World Economic Forum, Michigan's supposed to be the best place to live by 2050, and that includes the climate. So we're going to warm on up. All right, we're going to jump in. First thing I want to discuss with you is the MEDC board giving themselves a raise. Now, I want to apologize to you guys. I missed this MEDC meeting. I usually record all of them. Next week, Tuesday, the Michigan Strategic Fund has a meeting, and I will be recording that. I'm not going to forget this time. But it's unfortunate that I missed that one because they gave themselves a raise and a lot happened. So I'm going to read this article and hopefully it'll shed light. Again, I wish I would have recorded it, but Michigan statewide, November 28th of 2023, in a stunning display of arrogance and disregard for both resident voters and common economic sense. During its last meeting, the MEDC's executive board congratulated itself on a successful scorecard in 2023, handing out 6.5% in raises to the MEDC corporate employees who met performance goals. During the November 14th meeting, MEDC CEO Quentin Messer praised the board for hiring 2 additional officers to specialize in small business outreach in order to be more regionally relevant. And he thanked members for leading under the Whitmer administration a record number of domestic and international missions that have been highly successful. Messer underscored the governor's involvement in the MEDC's work. We're grateful for the governor's leadership. Messer also discussed the board's ongoing efforts to go out and engage in narrative change and perception management in communities targeted for development. Engage in narrative change and perception management. So the government is going to spend taxpayer dollars to try to re-educate us, the people that don't really want the battery plants here in Michigan stealing all our water. Yet events over the last 2 months have demonstrated nothing but failure for the MED's flagship Manufacturing 4.0 projects. In Green Charter Township and Big Rapids Township, yes, so the people got fired in those townships that brought forth those economic development plans. Come down here, the closest MEDC's board came to acknowledging statewide resident pushback on their playing fast and loose with tax dollars came during Messer's allusion to the inevitable dissipation of green energy federal tax subsidies from the IRA and Open Inflation Act in 2025, after the 2024 elections. Musing what will be the durability of those programs, Messer identified one of the main challenges as a disconnect between consumer sentiment, too many damn hydro dam facility videos, consumer sentiment, and down the line macroeconomic fundamentals. Statewide opposition to toxic, destructive international megasites is due, in Messer's opinion, purely to the common person's ignorance of larger macroeconomic fundamentals. Meanwhile, MEDC pushes projects that are likely to have funding sources revoked before they're built. It may be too early for MEDC to count any of its inked deals as successes, with many projects slowed and paused. An absolute best-case scenario for projects such as Goshen would see the megasites become operational in late 2025, during which time developers will face the expiration of IRA and OIA subsidies and deadlines for the CIP and SOAR funding clawbacks. So all this money, all these taxpayer dollars are going to go to these corporations, and then we're not even going to get the buildings because they're not going to build once the IRA tax credits are revoked. And since Trump is more than likely going to be president in 2024, he's going to revoke all this. So everything that's been happening this year, all these terrible deals, are going to fall through anyway. It's just our tax dollars are going to be lost. By the time the failure of these projects become fully apparent in the 2 to 3 years, Messer, the rest of the MEDC board, and local economic developers will likely have moved on to other roles with their performance-based raises in hand. It's absolutely disgusting to see them patting themselves on the back, says EDRA of Michigan advocate and Green Charter Township resident Brandy Sweet. Local officials supporting these projects are getting recalled across the state. Developers are pulling out of these projects right and left, and the MEDC's response is to give themselves all raises. They don't care if these projects even get built. They know they can make a fast buck for themselves and for their careers, so that's what they're doing, no matter how much taxpayer money they gamble and lose along the way. Excellent article out of EDRA of Michigan. I will, of course, have all the links to all of these down below. Now, the next thing is the Marshall Ford battery plant being considered the worst economic development deal of the year for 2023. Yesterday, 4 hours ago, so this morning actually, I said Goshen and Michigan has to take the cake, and they said close. So it was Marshall. And Dragonfly, good morning. I hope that you had a wonderful weekend, and thank you very much for joining me today. By the way, I never have said to you, I really love your picture. Beautiful dog. All right, so Michigan subsidies for Ford Motor Company electric vehicle battery plant named 2023's worst economic development deal of the year by the Center for Economic Accountability. Selected Michigan's $1.75 billion planned subsidies for an electric vehicle battery plant operated by a joint venture between Ford and Chinese firm Cattle as America's worst economic development deal of the year. It recognizes a state or municipal government subsidy of a private company in the name of job creation and economic growth that goes further than any other that year to exemplify the massive wastefulness and ineffectiveness of state government economic development subsidy programs. After 2022's record-setting pace of gigantic corporate subsidy deals, 2023 continued the dangerous trend of state and local government subsidies across the country, committing billions of dollars at a time to corporate projects. Even in that environment, Michigan's subsidy of the joint venture between Ford Motor Company and Chinese battery manufacturer in rural Michigan stood out for a unique combination of factors. Massive $700,000 per job price tag for below-average jobs. The use of unrealistic job multipliers to artificially justify its massive price tag, and an uncertain future where success would depend on labor negotiation, consumer preferences, federal policy, and technological advancements, all combined to make this deal stand out from the crowd. So thank you to the Center for Economic Accountability for being aware of such a terrible deal and pointing it out. Good morning. Thank you very much for joining me. I hope that you're doing well today, and hopefully I can inform you of one thing that maybe you didn't know about. That's always the goal. So Michigan, this is Lieutenant Governor Garland Gilchrist II. Now, he is a young global leader, last year, 2022. So the World Economic Forum definitely has its eye on this individual. Michigan is leading the nation on creating opportunity by automatically clearing people's criminal records. We have cleared 1.4 million offenses, granting 250,000 Michiganders a clean slate so they can fully participate in economic and civic life. Come down here, and I always like to read the comments. I called it, what a shocker. This comes at the same time the pre-registration to vote for ex-convicts. So they're trying to make it so that people that have a record can vote, and they're just going to clear out the history so then they can vote. So they're buying people's votes in many different ways. I don't know if you guys heard about Biden actually forgiving student loans, but that's another way that they're buying votes. That's the bottom line. Expected bill would ban Michigan lawmakers from signing NDAs. This comes out of Center Square. It came out day after Thanksgiving. It's not Christmas yet. So Michigan State Rep Steve Cara from Three Rivers says he will introduce a bill next year aiming to prohibit legislators from signing non-disclosure agreements. I don't know why of course I know why it hasn't been done. They want to be secretive, and they really don't want us to know anything that's going on because they don't respect our ideas or opinions. They want us to shut up and do what they say. And so that's why we don't comply, right? I will not consent. It's really that simple. If everyone did it, then we would stop this madness. The plan follows a Detroit News report revealing that nearly 1 in 5 Michigan lawmakers have signed secrecy pacts, gagging them from sharing their knowledge of taxpayer-funded projects. Again, they're supposed to represent us. So how is it that they can know secrets and we don't know them? Good morning, all. Hope everyone had an excellent weekend. Thank you for joining us, Zoltan the man. It's always a pleasure to have you guys with me, hanging out, talking about, how the world is going crazy or has already gone crazy. And, I really believe that we can't stop what's going to come down the pipeline, but we can be prepared. So just like the man has a wood-burning stove, try, if you can, to get prepared for power outages because of all of these energy bills that are coming through, not just Michigan, but federally as well. So have a wood-burning stove, have food, heat and food in Michigan, I would think would be the two biggest worries. So be prepared and, love your neighbor. Learn who your neighbor is. That will help you out immensely, especially if you live in the city. You really need to know who your neighbor is so that when shit hits the fan, you guys can get together and not be afraid of one another because you don't know them. Because that's the thing, when the unknown is what's scary. So anyway, elected officials have a duty to be as open and transparent as possible, Cara said in a statement. Lawmakers should never trade their silence for information about corruption that benefits the politically connected in their communities. Our job is to represent all the voices of our districts. The core problem is corporate control of the process, Leroy said in a phone interview. If this is really a public-private partnership, then both parties have to be equals at the table. And you can't do that if the operations get to hide all the information, including even their identity as the negotiations occur. On November 7th election, voters in Green Township ousted 5 board members who brought in Goshen without letting the community know about it. I always highlight now whenever Green Charter Township is used as an example. I think that it's really important for us to understand that although we don't feel like we have much power, we do. We still do in the townships, and while we have it, we should try to use that power while we have it. The China-linked electric vehicle battery parts plant is estimated to create, whatever. The free market should dictate where companies choose to expand, Kara said. NDAs in government exist to keep information from the public. Any information lawmakers have access to should be accessible to all Michigan residents. Just like tax cuts should be given equally to all businesses, not just special tax exemptions for the rich and connected. These NDAs are yet another result of the government interjecting itself into places it doesn't belong. Well said. I agree with this individual. I like this individual as far as this topic goes. I think that he is correct. Michigan battery startup Our Next Energy is laying off 25% of its staff. So we gave them money, last year? Novi-based Our Next Energy is cutting the workforce by 25%. It's laying off 128 employees, including 82 here in Michigan, in response to market conditions and to focus on core priorities. So, as we have been seeing, layoffs are abound. Spotify actually just laid off a good percentage, 10 or 15% of their employees right before Christmas. Obviously, that's really awful. Banks, I heard a huge layoff happened in banks very quietly, but I don't have the figures on how many, but it's happening. So, yeah, while decisions that impact our colleagues are always difficult, these actions position one for future growth and delivering on its mission, including continuing to establish its gigafactory, One Circle in Michigan, and to develop a North American supply chain for batteries. Last year, One announced a $1.6 billion investment supported by more than $200 million in state incentives. So there we go. We gave them $200 million in the promise that they'd hire 2,000 people. One expects the plant to be operating at full capacity, building enough cells to assemble the equivalent 200,000 EV battery packs annually by the end of 2027. And they go on to say, yeah, we're going to have the jobs there. We're going to bring them back. I don't believe them. I guess we'll see, right? Do you believe them? Over the course of 2024, as they get their high volume lineup up and running and start producing those cells, we'll probably see them start to hire more people again. We'll probably see. There's no guarantee. And Sam, principal e-mobility analyst at Market Research, that's what he said. Sam said that. Okay. So, reporting some layoffs. We're going to switch gears here. Pete Buttigieg was at Michigan State University. Now, I've heard a pretty terrible rumor. Zoltan says, I can deal with Stretch and Gretchen, but oh man, if Spotify goes down, I'll spiral. I'm not going to lie, I love Spotify. Between Audible and Spotify, I don't think I use, and YouTube, of course. Those are the top 3 apps that I use. But, yeah, Stretch and Gretchen. Pete Buttigieg, though, would you rather have Stretch and Gretchen or Pete Buttigieg as our governor? Because that's the rumor that I heard, that he might be going up for governor. And if Whitmer went for presidency, she wouldn't make it, but what would happen then with our governor? I should know this. But if she's actually campaigning and running to be president, who would be the governor of Michigan? Pete Buttigieg event at MSU erupts into chaos as climate activists rush the stage. What's really messed up is that this individual is pushing really hard for the transition into renewable energies. And yet it's not fast enough for these individuals who believe the climate scam. These people who are unfortunately brainwashed to think that the world is going to end if we don't cripple our energy independence. Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg appeared on the campus of Michigan State University Wednesday night, and the event devolved into chaos when climate activists rushed the stage. And we're going to watch it. Wearing masks. Sounds like maybe a man taking estrogen that's yelling. Stop Petro Pete. I think that's what they're saying. Stop Petro Pete. Come down here. We will shut down U.S. Secretary of Transportation, Pete Buttigieg. We will make him flee. We will make him scamper, the group predicted. We will make him quake. We will do not what is kind, but what is necessary. We will do so in Lansing. We will do so tonight. Buckle up. Michigan news source video showed the group chanting "Stop Petro Pete" as officers loudly ordered them to continue moving towards the door. Here's one a little closer. It's almost as bad as gluing your hand or cementing your hand to the ground. I mean, really, what does that do for anybody? It just angers individuals and pits them against each other. You know, I don't know about you, but I'm seeing more and more people going crazy. If they get stopped by the climate activists in the street, they're either getting close to running them over. One person actually got out and shot him. So people are at their wits' end with it. It's really not a good way to get your message across. You're not changing any hearts and minds at all. In fact, what you're doing is just pissing everybody off and making them, hate you. So don't do that. And obviously no one that's watching this is going to do that. So I don't even know what I'm talking about. We all know better. We all know better than to cripple our neighbor. That's what you're doing when you stand or sit in front of a freaking car and not let them pass. You're just hurting your neighbor. I'm not going to claim that Secretary Pete, but has had a legendary career yet, Blanchard told the crowd after acknowledging Buttigieg's comparative youth. Or I'm not going to claim he's some sort of icon, but I think it's true that he's had a fascinating career in public service, and I believe he will have a gifted career going forward. Meanwhile, other leftists attempted to shut Buttigieg down from outside the venue. Pro-Hamas? See, I don't like that they say this. This is the Midwesterner, and to me, when they say pro-Hamas, they're being disingenuous. Pro-Palestinian activists chanted for a permanent ceasefire in the wake of Hamas's October 7th terrorist attack against Israel. Now, maybe I'm mistaken. Maybe they are for Hamas, which is the terrorist group. But to me, I think that they're just for the Palestinians. Ceasefire now! Ceasefire now! And I'm not saying that they're right. Again, it's a very complex issue, but war is never the answer for the people. For governments, it certainly is the answer. Ceasefire now! Ceasefire now! Ceasefire now! Ceasefire now! Ceasefire now! Ceasefire now! Oops, and we're going to see more and more of this, of course, all next year. So this is just the beginning, and right now it's mild. So praise God for that. We are asking Joe Biden and all of those working for him in the cabinets for a ceasefire. That's what America is asking for. We're being our own American self, expressing our love for our democracy and listening to our people. And the people say ceasefire, and we say ceasefire, said Saba Saeed, the VP of the Arab Cultural Society at MSU. So Michigan State University, though, August, had Fauci speaking. I think spent $250,000 to have Fauci speak there when he should be in jail. So I, at one point, wanted to go to Michigan State University. Now I know I'm thankful that I didn't go to any college.
It's the most bizarre.
Okay, so this is January 6th update. I just found this video, so I thought I'd show it to you. Oh, no, I'm sorry. This is Joe Biden's inauguration. I have a January 6th coming up.
Are seeing you ever saw in your life.
It's hard to see, even though
there's like 100 people at the Biden inauguration.
So this is supposed to be the most popular president ever, with the most votes ever in American history. And this is the small group that's actually at the inauguration.
And it's dystopian. So There's nobody here. There's like more people up here with the press overlooking the Capitol than there are at the inauguration. We're here with Fox News and CNN, and this guy Eric is great from TBN. He's a Middle East correspondent.
Let's see. Yeah, he goes on. I don't know
but
if
they're all National Guardsmen who are forced to be here.
Okay.
There is no security threat down here. It's just a lie. And I think they brought in these 25,000 troops because Biden couldn't get enough people to his inauguration, and it's a cover.
Yeah, the wind is obviously terrible, but never ever forget who is responsible for what has been done to our country. Well, to be fair, Biden is just a puppet. And so it's not really him that's bringing down America. He's just the face, you know. And, you know, I read rather, The Art of War, but it's one of those books that you'll have to read over and over again. But in The Art of War, it says that the general, you know, if the general, which basically the president is our general, if the general is weak, then the country is weak. And that's what we have. We have a weak president. And it is a puppet position, but he's meant to look like he does. A weak old man. And he's going to be the reason why he's going to be who we blame, but he's not really the reason. The central banks, of course, have a way bigger piece of that pie, the destruction of American pie. All right, so we have the Detroit Police Commissioner. My grandfather's murder remains unsolved. This is a letter to the editor, and I just wanted to highlight this because it shows how corrupt the police are in Detroit, as well as the mayor, which I don't know anything about the mayor of Detroit, but in order to be the mayor, you'd have to be pretty corrupt, honestly. As a member of the Detroit Board of Commissioners, I wanted to change my bad experiences and to ensure no other family had to go through this type of trauma. I wanted to improve the quality of policing in Detroit by demanding honesty and transparency from police leadership. But our requests are oftentimes ignored by Chief James White, and the normalcy of unsolved crime continues. As of this week, we have been waiting 6 months for Corporation Counsel Conrad Mallett to honor our subpoena requests on 24 issues from missing persons to facial recognition. We request information for purpose of transparency and to provide the public confidence in the police. But the Detroit Police Department is not being transparent. Chief White touts transparency, but ultimately it seems hides behind task forces, attorneys, expensive FOIA requests, and the statement that information can't be released due to open investigations, and what I can only conclude is a bid to silence the truth. The chief, it seems to me, is stonewalling justice. Detroit Mayor Michael Dugan is aware of the issues with the Detroit Police Department. His focus has been on reducing our budget for investigators and not allowing us to research and hire our own attorney. But the mayor has been available to take photo ops around town for what many believe is his upcoming bid for governor. I want the friends and family members of victims of unsolved crimes to know that the fight for transparency continues. I stand with you. I just find it curious that there's so many rumors now. It's not just Pete Buttigieg, but Michael Dugan here might go up for governorship when Whitmer was just rehired last year. So something strange is going on. All right, we're getting in the main event here. Grand Rapids, Helen DeVos Children's Hospital limits visitors and pediatric illness rise. Only 2 visitors are permitted at the bedside. Now, obviously, it's much better to have 2. I am not for limiting. I think that you should try to stay away from the hospital as much as possible because the death cult has captured it. Now, I'm not saying that the nurses and doctors inside it are aware of that and are actively evil or anything like that. I'm saying that if you can avoid the hospital, do so at all costs. If you have to go to the hospital, please make sure that you are paying attention to everything that's being administered and everything that's going on because nurses are understaffed, doctors are understaffed, they're tired, they make mistakes, they're human beings, and you cannot trust the procedures that are going on. They are following certain procedures, following orders, and many of them don't question those. And I'm not saying anything about it. I'm just saying you need to be careful when you go. Be vigilant, constant vigilance. Yeah, again, avoid at all costs. I told you guys a little bit about my experience in 2021, but what I didn't really nail home is that my husband and I take care of my mother-in-law. And so at the time, only one of us could see her, and it had to be the entire time. So if she was in the hospital for a week, only my husband could go see her, which is completely unfair because I'm the better caretaker, but I'm not her daughter, that's her son. So we had to make a terrible decision whether or not it was, her own son that gets to see her for the week that she's in the hospital, what have you, or me, or I do, which I'm the primary caretaker. So it was just one of many different struggles that we had to go through. And unfortunately, it looks like we're going to have to go through them again if you have to go to the hospital. So I'm going to avoid it. Obviously, sometimes things happen that you can't. So then make sure that you know what's going on. You can't trust anybody with your family member. Due to a high number of pediatric admissions and an increase in respiratory illness throughout the community, Corewell Health Helen DeVos Children's Hospital will be limiting the number of visitors to the hospital. The hospital announced on Instagram. Effective immediately, only 2 visitors are permitted at the bedside during the day and 1 visitor overnight. The NICU visitor policy remains unchanged. That's awful. So you have a child that's extremely sick, perhaps could die any day, and only the mother or the father can stay overnight? I'm not for it. I'm not for it. These hospitals are tyrannical, and again, the death cult has taken over. You know that a doctor gets 15 minutes or 30 minutes, that's it. 15 or 30 minutes to actually talk to the patient. They don't really examine you anymore. They just type on their computer. The whole thing is screwed. Not only is this above the county average, it also meets the limitation comes as there has been an outbreak of so-called white lung syndrome in Warren County, Ohio. Not only is this above the county average, it also meets the Ohio Department of Health definition of an outbreak. The county's health department said Wednesday, where there has been 142 cases since August. Helen DeVos says it is experiencing a high volume of pediatric admissions in addition to increased respiratory illness throughout the community. Now, I'm going to pose a question. It could absolutely be that germ theory is correct and that our government can create extremely deadly viruses and release them out into the public. But if you were trying to run the world, would you risk such a thing? Would you do that? The other possibility is that technology can cause illness, and we don't know, right? If you're using millimeter waves, it can affect people, and so perhaps in combination with the jab, they could cause illness through technology. Now, I know that some people would say that sounds nuts, but it's as verifiable as some lab-grown virus. Neither one can be verified, unfortunately. I'm going to tell you another story. I'm just going to be completely transparent. 2021, my husband and I were lucky enough that we were able to buy a Sea-Doo. We live on a river, and that was the toy that we chose. We went down to Ann Arbor to pick up our Sea-Doo. No one that we were around was sick. Everybody we talked to, there was no sniffling, nothing. Everybody was perfectly healthy. We were perfectly healthy. Everybody was fine. We buy the Sea-Doo, we hook it up. On our way home, myself, my husband, and my mother-in-law all at the very same time said, I feel fuzzy. Something's going on in my head that feels weird. And we all agreed. All three of us got sick. My husband actually was the only one with a fever. I was just exhausted, and then I lost smell and taste for 3 weeks. 2.5, 3 weeks. No smell and taste. It was awful. It was so hard to eat. Hamburger texture when there's no taste, it's crazy. I like I said, I was struggling eating. So thank God for smell and taste. Otherwise, food is not good. So why is it that the three of us experienced it in Ann Arbor, nowhere else? So I'm just going to throw it out there. Is it because Ann Arbor has 5G technology and that we got zapped by 5G technology? How can you prove that that's not true? Again, no one was sick at the place. No one was sniffling. Everybody was perfectly healthy. And all three of us at the same time. It's weird. It was weird. And again, I've never experienced anything. I've been sick, of course. When I was in the military, I had to get the flu shot every year. Every year I got the flu. Never in my life have I experienced no smell and no taste. Is that a technological illness? Is that a millimeter wave poisoning? I mean, how do you know? I've just got to throw it out there. So now you know my COVID story. That was 2021. I had COVID, whatever that is, whatever that means. I got sick and had no smell and no taste for 3 weeks. I never have taken a test. I never will put anything up my nose. Not happening. Michigan's top, sorry, I'm gonna keep going here to this one. No, wait. I am gonna talk about this, but I actually, right here, we'll do this one. We'll stick with people for a minute. New mystery illness sweeps through China and India as experts warn of pandemic. Experts in the UK claim we might just get away with the illness spreading overseas as countries in Asia prepare for a COVID-like outbreak with increased supply and infrastructure. So once again, to be prepared, make sure you get zinc, get some vitamin C. I just watched a video where you can get the spray bottles and you can put hydrogen peroxide in the spray bottle and that will actually help you. You can look into it for yourself. I will try to find the video I saw and link it down below as well. But basically, try to be prepared to take care of yourself at home. So get whatever is necessary when you're sick. What do you like? You want some soup, tea, just be prepared. Try to avoid this hospital. Don't go there. Okay, you don't go there if you can. Experts are reportedly worried about a mysterious illness that has been sweeping across China and now threatens the UK. The illness has been linked to white lung pneumonia and has been reported in countries like China and India, with experts suggesting we could see another COVID-like scenario. Now, other people have been saying that perhaps it's a side effect of the vaccine. I mean, again, the vaccine was given out in 2020, 2021, and we really don't know exactly what's going to happen, what could happen. We don't know what side effects are possible. So don't believe everything that you see. Don't be afraid of your neighbor. That's basically it. Don't be afraid of your neighbor. Don't blame your neighbor if you get sick, and don't be afraid of them. China have now raised their alert levels due to the rapid spread of the strain, with hospitals in Beijing overrun. Okay, but see, you can't trust anything out of China, so we do have to be careful of that. It's possible that is true. It's possible it's a lie. The illness is reportedly difficult to track as people are showing no signs of infection, not even a cough. The World Health Organization is also closely monitoring the spread of disease. Some areas of India are now bracing for the illness to spread through the country as they are boosting their medical infrastructure, as it is unclear how quickly the new disease will spread. But University of Reading biologist Professor Ian Jones believes that Britain might get away with it this season because we have a small physical break from Europe. He added, the important point is that this sort of bounce back should be expected and the public health should be aware of it. We have also requested further information about recent trends in the circulation of known pathogens, including influenza, SARS-CoV-2, RSV. Okay. So, round 2, like I said, let's just be aware of it, but don't let fear rule you. Just be a witness to what's going on. Michigan's top veterinarian offers guidance as mysterious dog illness spreads across the U.S. The guidance, of course, is to get your dog checked and all that jazz. Make sure you get all your vaccines for your dog. Well, you can listen to them. I'm going to present the information, but I personally don't trust veterinarians just like I don't trust doctors. And no offense to the vets, I just feel like you don't know what you're doing. My dog, I had I'm not going to get into the story, but my dog almost died. They basically said you should put her down. She'll never be the same. And guess what? She is the same right now. She's just fine. I brought her home. I brought her back to life. I don't trust the vet at all. But state officials are encouraging dog owners in Michigan to remain vigilant about their pet's health as a mysterious illness spreads across the U.S. The Michigan Department of Agriculture and Rural Development sent out a notice on Wednesday, even though the atypical respiratory illness has not been reported in Michigan. Cases have been reported in 14 states, including Oregon, California, Colorado, Florida, Georgia, Idaho, Illinois, Indiana, Maryland, Massachusetts, New Hampshire, Rhode Island, Vermont, and Washington. While the exact cause of this illness remains unknown, taking some basic steps to prevent dogs' exposure to harmful germs can go a long way to protecting their overall health. Yeah. Please don't get your dog a flu shot. Your dog dogs and human beings have lived without big pharma for however long you believe. Millions of years, billions of years, trillions of years, 2,000 years, doesn't really matter. As long as we have known about humans being on this plane of existence, we have lived without big pharma. We have an immune system. So if owners notice respiratory symptoms such as coughing, sneezing, and nasal discharge in their dogs, it is important to reach out to their vet early on in their animal's illness so diagnostic testing can be completed and an appropriate course of treatment can begin. Now, this worries me because dogs are coming down with a respiratory illness. Okay, no, this worries me because this is how terrible your pet is for the world. Bad news for pet owners. Pets are unsustainable. This is Vice. Pets. What is it, pets? What's that? Those animals that live in your house and rely on you for sustenance. Is it recyclable? Probably not. This article is stupid. It is Vice, but it's just to showcase the point that I have 4 articles. I'm not going to go through each and every one of them, but just to show you that they think pets are unsustainable, and so they want them to be gone. Look, we all love pets. Yours especially, Flappy, or whatever twee name you've given him, is literally the best pet ever. But is Flappy the best thing even for the environment? Best thing ever for the environment? Is little Flappy actually destroying Earth's delicately balanced atmosphere? Unfortunately, yes, he is. Can you see how anti-life this whole thing is? And I just thought about it. Carbon tax is basically a tax on life. You're alive, you're breathing, you're going to be taxed. There are many impacts of pets on the environment, says Gregory Oken from UCLA. But they can also carry disease, pollute waterways and coastal zones through runoff from areas with feces, and have adverse effects on wildlife. In fact, Little Flappy's food is the main concern when it comes to the environmental devastation, especially all those lovely wet chunks of jellied cow fat and pulverized chicken face. According to Gregory's study, meat eaten by pets creates the equivalent of 64 million tons of CO2 a year, which has about the same environmental impact as a year's amount of fumes from 13.6 million cars. Your dog is so bad for the environment that it's worse than 13.6 million car fumes. Let's see. Yes, the carbon they want to eliminate is us. Carlot says, you're right. It is. I just wish more people would wake up to that fact. I mean, I talked to my neighbor about it, and I said the whole industry is based on the lie that carbon is a pollution. And he said, a lot of good stuff comes out of lies. Okay. Yeah. So, is Little Flappy, as adorable as he is, one of the biggest threats currently facing the environment? Yes and no, but mainly yes. Basically, I think people are blind to the fact that pets might have any impact at all, Gregory explains. People are very aware of choices related to driving, water use, fertilizer pollution, and so on, but they are less aware of the impacts that their choice to have a pet and that the choice to have a certain kind of pet has on the environment. Mind you, we can mostly blame dogs and cats, especially big dogs and cats. So how is this going to work? Are they going to ban having animals whatsoever? Like, I'm pretty sure China, you can't have pets. I'm like 90% sure. They don't, so I'm pretty sure it's because the government won't let them. But maybe it's just their culture. But either way, no pets in China. And so now they want us to be more like China. And I thought about, like, why? Why against pets? And it's like, because of love. Of course. Voldemort doesn't understand love, completely disregards it, doesn't want it in the world, okay? And Voldemort is basically the equivalent of Satan or what have you, just evil, the representation of evil. It's just a symbol, if you will, of evil. Evil doesn't like love. It's the antithesis, right? That's why it's evil, because it doesn't want it or understand it. That's the only thing I can think of and why they'd want to get rid of our dogs and cats. They bring such joy to us and love. I mean, it's really sad. I've never been without a pet, and I never want to be. One of the most important choices people can make with the pets they have is to feed their pets a less meat-rich diet. Gregory explained, dogs are not wolves. They do not need a mostly meat diet. I find this funny because I just watched a video on YouTube that a dog owner that's a vegan said, my dog's vegan. And they put a bowl of greens, salad greens, and a bowl of meat in front of the dog. And what do you think the dog ate? I mean, come on. It's pretty obvious. It ate the meat. And she was upset that her dog wasn't a vegan. Like she put that on her dog. And yeah, it's just these people are crazy. It's like narcissism to the extreme. Like, I'm a vegan, my dog's got to be a vegan. Anyway, it's crazy. Dogs need meat. I feed my dog eggs or hamburger with peas or carrots. And luckily I have small dogs, so it keeps the cost down. But since then, my dogs have been 100% healthier. My older dog had a growth that was on her neck. It was getting bigger and bigger and bigger. She started coughing all the time, like she was choking, like it was inside her throat. And the vet didn't say anything about it, didn't do anything about it. I pointed out. They couldn't figure out what was wrong with her, why she was almost like she was coughing, choking all the time. And I changed her diet completely. They never said a single word about diet. Nothing, not one word about diet. I changed her diet. Within a month, it gone down. Within 3 months, it was completely gone. There's no bump there. She's not coughing anymore. It's gone. She is healthy for a 16-year-old blind diabetic dog. She is as healthy as she can be. And again, when I went into the doctor, I told them about the changing the diet, and they were all like, wow, it's so crazy. I even brought her diabetic meds from 5.5 liters, the insulin, down to 2.5 now. She's lost a bunch of weight. Like, I was hoping I could completely reverse it, but I don't know, maybe it's too late. Anyway, I'm getting into rants, but my point being, dogs need good food just like humans do, right? If you feed them processed garbage, they're going to get growths on their neck and all kinds of stuff potentially could happen to them, cancer, what have you. So eat healthy yourself. Try to feed your dogs as healthy as you can. Again, I know it's difficult, but wet dog food, it was $30 for a 12-pack of wet food. Like, that's insane. Is your pet killing the planet? Obviously, I can't read this because I don't have a subscription, but it's just to show you that there are several articles. This is the Independent. By owning a pet, you are doing more damage to the environment than you might realize. It just goes on how selfish you are and how you're destroying this plane of existence because you have a dog. Our pets are part of the climate problem. These tips can help you minimize their carbon paw prints. And humans caught more diseases after we domesticated animals. Completely verifiable, right? right? Analysis of DNA from human remains up to 37,000 years old shows that more infectious diseases jump from animals to people after the dawn of farming. Don't believe it. It's really after the dawn of germ theory when they started making this stuff up. That's when we got to be afraid of bird flu, mad cow disease. The Chinese people ate a bat, and now you have disease. No, it doesn't work like that, man. It's intelligently designed. Tyson Foods joins bug protein craze in partnership with startup. I was able to read this, but now because I've read it too many times, I can't any longer. But basically, they're going for dog food, so it's connected with all of those articles about your dog or cat being bad for the environment. They're trying to fix that by feeding them bug protein instead. Not just humans, dogs will eat bug protein too, if they get to survive. COVID-19 pandemic drives increase in children's speech delays. So this came out August 9th. I was doing some research though, and I wanted to share this. Another story, when this all first started, I was having a conversation, a disagreement with a family member about the masks and how we have no idea. I said, we have no idea what they're doing to the children. Think about if you are a developing brain, you have a child, a baby, 1, 2, 3, 4-year-old that's learning to talk, and you have your mouth covered. You have half your face covered. You are cutting off half of the information. That's what you're doing to these children. And this person argued with me and said there's no harm being done to the children. And now here we are a couple years later, and it's proven that yes, it was extremely damaging, which is just logical. Again, you cut off half the information and a developing brain is not going to be able to develop fully, not going to be able to register emotions, and it's awful. So if you're a parent, you know the excitement of waiting for your child's first words, typically somewhere between 12 and 18 months. But since the pandemic, some children have been taking longer to start talking, and that's leading to a spike in requests for evaluations by speech pathologists. Dragonfly says kidney cells from green monkey and animal vaccines. I don't know anything about that. Kidney cells. I've heard something about DNA being found in the vaccines. They just released that information, but I would like to share more on here about that, but I think even saying the word vaccine will get this video dinged. I don't know. I'm not really worried about it because I'm just trying to spread the truth, but that just means that y'all will have to help me out and share this video far and wide because YouTube definitely will not. But Marshall Terry, so Lindsay, what did Charlotte's speech pathologist tell you they were seeing, and how much longer is it taking for some toddlers to speak their first words? Lindsay says, so since the pandemic, speech pathologists across the country have been reporting a higher percentage of children who need therapy, which they test by a speech evaluation. So they've seen an increase in children who are basically failing their speech evaluations. So I spoke with the executive director of the Charlotte Speech and Hearing Center, which is a nonprofit practice in Charlotte that serves Union and Mecklenburg counties. Her name is Shannon Tucker, and she told me that 2019, which is pre-pandemic, they screened 2,200 children and saw an average 20% failure rate, which again is referring to those children who aren't speaking at their age level. And then in 2022, coming out of the pandemic, they screened around the same number of children and saw a 50% failure rate. I saw a 65 to 70% failure rate in those higher poverty areas of Charlotte and Union County. So imagine that. If you couldn't afford private school, your public school system was closed. And if you're poor, you can't afford a babysitter that maybe educates as well as watches the child. Of course, it hurts the poor and the middle class more than it would hurt the rich people. So what's leading to this increase in speech delays? Stimulation, I learned, outside of the home is so important to children's speech development, and the pandemic shut down everything. So that meant no story time at the library, No play dates, no playing with other children on playgrounds, and no trips to the grocery store even. And because these children were staying at home, their only social interactions with their parents. And she goes on to say basically every need they would just give their child, so they didn't need to talk. Now, not being around other children or adults, as you mentioned, is one aspect of this, but what about wearing masks and not being able to see people talk? Did that have an effect? Yes, and that's a great question. Another thing I learned is that lip reading and watching mouth movement is also an important factor in a child's speech development. And lip reading usually begins around 8 months of age. So they start looking at mouth movements and mimic when they're trying to form words. And so the limited times that younger children were leaving the home, during the pandemic, maybe to go to the doctor, they were hearing people talk to them, but they weren't able to see their mouths because they were covered by a mask. But for children in speech therapy, the mother that I spoke to told me during the pandemic, wore a clear mask during their in-person session. Clear mask. So it goes on basically to say that the masks did cause speech impediments for the younger generations, the children. Let's not do it again. Let's not do it again. I will not comply. That's really all we have to do. Who remembers this guy? John McAfee. I don't know if you guys remember. He said, do not, under any circumstances, take the vaccine on 5/2/2020. He was dead a month later, committed suicide, even though there's a video out there with him saying he would never commit suicide. So they got him. And he was a millionaire, maybe even a billionaire. I'm pretty sure just a multi-millionaire. And they got him. It's pretty concerning. He tried to warn people. All right, so I don't know if you guys know about New Zealand. And the administrator published the secret data proving that the government murdered their own people. We will continue. And this is her.
We will continue to be your single source of truth. You can trust us as a source of that information. You can also trust the Director General of Health and the Ministry of Health. For that information, do feel free to visit at any time to clarify any rumour you may hear.
So this is David Icke, and I just want to read this because I think it's important to know. So Ardern is the personification of the World Economic Forum controlled psychopaths that enforced the fake vaccine that has killed and maimed so many and continues to do so. She and her, like around the world, must be arrested and prosecuted for mass murder, for which they are guilty under several definitions of murder, but absolutely by the second one at the end of this post. Now, I am saying this because people need to be held accountable. I'm sorry if you got the jab. I pray for you, and I absolutely have hope that people can detox from it. People are starting to talk about it, and people want to detox from it. So I have nothing against the people that got the jab. What needs to happen now is the people that push this, that force, that coerced individuals into getting this, they need to be held accountable. So another personal thing. Unfortunately, my husband's band member passed away last week, and they found out Friday when they were supposed to play a gig. It's really unfortunate, but he passed away from several blood clots. He was 65 years old. He was just about to retire. Somebody needs to be held accountable for that. It's awful. And so that is why I'm talking about it. It's not to make anyone feel bad or scared. What's done is done. But now somebody needs to be held responsible for this. Here's the but. Ardern and her kind could tell people to have the fake vaccine, threaten their livelihood, and intimidate them in multiple ways, but short of being held down the road, could not force them to have it. It was still a choice. In the end, authoritarian dictators depend upon the acquiescence of the population to their tyranny. Don't acquiesce. That's the point of this, his message, is just say no. If we all say no, they can't force us all. If we stand together this time, they can't force us. That's what his message is saying. And I wanted to share that before I share this. 973% in the military. Heart failure is up 973%. and 73%. This is a medical officer revealing.
Undersecretary Cisneros acknowledged the DMET data, the database working properly, and also acknowledged things such as myocarditis rising 151%. So what I did, I went in today. I'm doing the same thing, 5-year average. However, I'm comparing it to 2022, and I only am using fixed wing pilots and helicopter pilots, active duty. So we get hypertensive disease, 36%, ischemic heart disease, 69%, pulmonary heart disease, 62%, heart failure, 973%, other forms of heart disease, 63%.
Military pilots.
Cardiomyopathy, 152%.
That's military pilots. That's how weak our military is now. They've crushed our military. Face diapers. Yes, face diapers is right. Unfortunately, I did wear them when I went in with my mother-in-law. And I hate that I had to. I always kept it below my nose and no one said anything to me. But I still felt like I was compromising my beliefs. And I hated that. Everything is consent. The devil, evil, never forces you to do anything. You're right. But he does convince or coerce or brainwash. He uses all the methods in the book. But in the end, you do have to give your permission. That's part of the magic. That's why they tell you, too, what they're doing. Is because in the end, they'll say, we told you. You didn't do anything about it, so that means you consented. And that's how they cover their ass. I think that's all I had for the new illness that's going around, allegedly. Again, don't let fear overcome you. Just be prepared and observe. That's all you can do. So we're going to talk about the technology installed beneath Detroit Street can charge electric vehicles as they drive. So I have discussed this already, but now it's actually in the news because the road is being complete. Crews have installed what's billed as the nation's first wireless charging public road for electric vehicles beneath a street just west of downtown Detroit. Copper inductive charging coils allow vehicles equipped with receivers to charge up their batteries while driving, idling, or parking above the coils. The quarter-mile segment of 14th Street will be used to test and perfect the technology ahead of making it available to the public within a few years, according to the Michigan Department of Transportation. The technology belongs to Electrion, an Israel-based developer of wireless charging solutions for EVs. The company has contracts for similar roadways, Israel, Sweden, Italy, and Germany. The pilot initiative in Michigan was announced in 2021 by Governor Gretchen Whitmer. In Michigan, we want to stay ahead of the curve. We want to lead the curve. Michigan DOT Director Bradley Rich said, no decisions have been made on revenue models in Michigan. He said, the technology is smart. The technology knows who you are. You're a verified and authentic user. You can get a charge. So it's not going to be free. Is it going to be like a toll road? Or you have to, maybe it's a subscription model. Probably, right? So then you have to have an application downloaded to your phone or maybe downloaded to your EV car. Your EV. And so you have to pay $10 a month for you to be able to use the road to charge? Is that what it's saying? It's not really clear on that. But no decisions have been made on revenue models. That's what it's indicating to me. You let me know. Am I misreading that? Misunderstanding that, rather? Switching it up. Gun buyback program. Michigan, you know what to do. And you come down here, 3D printer go burr. So that's what people think when they see these buyback programs, at least the ones that I look at on Twitter, X, whatever you want to call it. Basically, people have been printing guns, 3D printing them, and I think it costs like $60 or $70 for an assault rifle. And so you could turn around and sell them here for $200. So $150, $125 turnaround. Now, is that legal? I'm not sure. I'm not gonna lie. I have not looked into 3D printer and creating guns and all the rules and regulations, if there are any. I don't know. I just know that there have been other states where people have done this. So in their state, it must have been legal, but they created a gun and turned around and sold it for the buyback. Whitmer approves temporary gun ban for those with domestic violence convictions. Whitmer signed legislation Monday to temporarily ban those with domestic violence convictions from possessing and purchasing firearms and ammunition. These bills are based on the simple idea, Whitmer said during a bill signing ceremony in Kalamazoo. If you have been found guilty in court for violently assaulting your partner, you should not be able to access a deadly weapon that you could use to further threaten, harm, or kill them. If only that was all that it was about, right? If it really was about helping women make sure that they don't get shot after a domestic abuse case, then I would be behind it. But of course, that's not what it's about. They have changed what a misdemeanor is in this bill. That's what it's really about, which we're going to get into. It does go in. This is Detroit Free Press. Let's see. She joined the Democratic bill sponsors and advocates of the legislation who shared stats highlighting the prevalence of firearm homicide by intimate partners and the increased risk to women in domestic violence situations when their abuser has access to a firearm. Those who violate the ban will be guilty of a felony and could spend up to 5 years in prison and pay $5,000 fine. The bill signed by Whitmer will take effect in mid-February. Right here, the new law bars individuals convicted of a misdemeanor involving domestic violence from possessing, using, transporting, selling, purchasing, carrying, shipping, receiving, or distributing firearms or ammunition in Michigan for 8 years after they paid all fines, served out any imprisonment term, and completed the conditions of probation imposed on them. Crazy. That is a long time. Federal law prohibits those with misdemeanor domestic violence convictions from purchasing and possessing a gun. So it's already a federal law. So why does Michigan need to have a state law? Having a state law that mirrors that federal one would ensure the ban is actually enforced, said April Zioli, director of the Policy Core for the Institute of Firearm Injury Prevention at the University of Michigan in February. But what does that mean? Having a state law that mirrors the federal law would ensure the ban is actually enforced. Why would having a state law make sure it's enforced, but the federal law doesn't make sure it's enforced? Like, what are you talking about? If they're not enforcing it federally, why would they enforce it statewide? Right now in Michigan, if you're convicted of domestic violence misdemeanor crime, you don't necessarily lose your right to have a gun. You do federally, she said. It's not really being implemented. So any guns you already have, no one makes sure you get rid of them. So there's already a law, but the law isn't being enforced. So now we need to make another law, because that will make sure it's enforced. Almost 2/3 of intimate partner homicides in the U.S. involve a gun, according to the most recent analysis for the Center for Disease Control. Yeah, I trust them. Here we go. The bills follow others approved by the governor aimed at reducing gun violence. Earlier this year, she approved new laws expanding background checks to all firearm purchases and establishing new requirements for gun owners to store their firearms or take their gun somewhere a child could gain access to it. She approved both gun restrictions 2 months after a deadly shooting at MSU. So, problem, reaction, solution. You have a deadly shooting at MSU. Now we get to put in the gun bills that we wanted to put in. A month later, she approved a so-called red flag law in Michigan allowing enforcement, family, healthcare providers, and others to petition courts to temporarily remove guns from those a judge determines pose an imminent threat to themselves or others. Come over here, Gretchen Whitmer, to Michigan men. Don't annoy your ex or enter her empty ice shanty without her permission or the cops will take your guns. Now, obviously, this is a little bit funny or satirical. Governor Whitmer signed a slate of new gun control laws in November that confiscates firearms and ammunition from people in Michigan who have been convicted of both violent and nonviolent misdemeanors under new legal definitions of domestic violence misdemeanors established in the new laws. These bills, passed by the Democrat-controlled State House and Senate, broadly expand the category of misdemeanors considered to be domestic violence to include many infractions that are clearly not violent, allow law enforcement to confiscate all firearms from anyone convicted of these misdemeanors, and prohibit anyone convicted of these misdemeanors from buying or owning firearms for 8 years. One of the bills, Senate Bill 528, defines the act of stepping foot into your current or ex-partner's vacant ice shanty without her permission as a domestic violence misdemeanor, as long as the shanty is worth $100 or more. Another section says if you annoy or disturb the peace and quiet of another person who is your current or former domestic partner using a telecommunication service or device, you are guilty of domestic violence misdemeanor. The consequence of having a domestic violence misdemeanor on your record is the forced confiscation of all your firearms and ammunition. You will also be unable to purchase or own firearms for 8 years in Michigan. Whitmer insists the new laws are about protecting women. Keeping Michiganders, especially young women, safe and healthy is a top priority, and these bills will take long overdue steps to protect individuals from abuse. Again, when seconds matter, cops are minutes away. I think that in order for women to be protected, they need to be able to protect themselves with a firearm. The Second Amendment is unalienable right given by God. It's not given by the Constitution, which is created by man or human beings. And so if you want to protect women, then every single woman should learn how to use a gun and have one. That's how you really protect women. A careful reading of the bills proves these bills are not designed for public protection as much as to make it easier for more people to be convicted of misdemeanors for which the government has the power to confiscate weapons by force. It goes well beyond domestic violence and adds about 100 misdemeanors to the list, said Phil Green in a statement to Tribune. This is a complete gun grab that advances the left's assault on our constitutional rights. If the motive behind the law is safety and not gun confiscation, it is curious as to why Democrats refused to support Republican-sponsored bills in the House and Senate aimed not at gun owners, but at criminals and proven specific school safety measures. The Democrats voted down our plan to give prosecutors money to reduce their caseloads and to give schools money for cameras, electronic lock systems, and door blocks. That's not the answer either. Basically create prison systems out of schools by having lockdown systems and might as well put bars on the windows. That's not the answer either. Cameras, yeah, more surveillance. Have the government watching our children. And any hackers can watch your children. I just don't agree with it. Daley went on to say if Democrats were serious about reducing gun violence, they would insist that soft on crime prosecutors enforce the gun laws we already have, and they'd give schools the resources they need to make buildings safe from criminals. Again, the only reason that schools are targeted and hospitals is because there are no guns allowed. And ultimately, criminals are cowards, and they don't want to go against people that have guns. They want to go against people that don't. The 3 bills Whitmer signed last week are also mostly absent of any protection for the accused, Daley added. These red flag bills don't even include guaranteed right to legal counsel. So dangerous. In a press release, Michigan State Police Director Colonel James Grady II voiced strong support for the new laws by saying these bills give our troopers a valuable tool in the fight to keep survivors of domestic abuse safe. One might wonder whether Colonel Grady, the few Republicans who voted in favor of the bills, or the rest of the media in the country have actually read them. The Tribune has read these bills, and here's what they say. Senate Bill 528 redefines dozens of misdemeanors to be included into a new expanded domestic violence class of misdemeanors. Senate Bill 528 includes many nonviolent offenses that do not cause physical harm to anyone. House Bill 4945 updates the sentencing guidelines to prohibit those convicted of domestic violence as redefined in SB 528 from buying or owning any firearm or ammunition for 8 years. Senate Bill 471 prohibits the possession or use of firearms and ammunition by persons convicted of a misdemeanor involving domestic violence. This bill allows law enforcement to confiscate all guns and ammo owned by these individuals and applies to people who have been convicted of any domestic violence misdemeanor as defined in Senate Bill 528. All of the following are considered domestic violence according to this bill, if done against someone with whom the defendant is currently or has been in a domestic relationship. Entering any vacant and unlocked structure belonging to the domestic partner without permission. Annoying or disturbing the peace and quiet of another person through telecommunication service and device. Damaging personal property, even if the damage is less than $200. So I could have my guns taken away if I damaged property, even if the damage is less than $200. Engaging what the victim believes to be harassing behavior that the victim claims emotional distress. Oh, that's not dangerous at all. A married or a couple in general doesn't have to be married. A couple gets into a fight and now you claim emotional distress and you can have your guns taken away. Using vulgar, indecent, obscene, or offensive language through the use of telecommunications device. And shutting off the other's telecommunications service. Oh, so if I get mad and shut my husband's phone off, then that is domestic violence. And I could be charged. Section 115 says, any individual who breaks and enters or enters without breaking any dwelling, house, tent, barn, boat, railroad car, outbuilding, or ice shanty with a value of $100 or more, whether occupied or unoccupied, without first obtaining permission to enter from the person having immediate control thereof, is guilty of a misdemeanor. So, if a person enters any structure exceeding $100 in value owned by his or her current or former partner without permission, he or she is guilty of a domestic violence misdemeanor. Section 377A says that someone who willfully and maliciously destroys or injures the personal property of another person, when the owner of that personal property is a current or former domestic partner, is guilty of a domestic violence misdemeanor. So this is what the bill is really about. Changing what it means to have a domestic violence misdemeanor. It's not just beating your significant other, like that actual physical violence. Obviously, that is terrible, awful. You should never do that. But domestic violence misdemeanor for just entering somebody else's ice shack, there's no violence in that. This applies even if the damage is less than $200. If the amount of the destruction or injury is less than $200, the person is guilty of a misdemeanor. Section 411H defines a class of misdemeanors where a judge can convict an individual of stalking or harassment if there is a pattern of conduct composed of a series of 2 or more separate continuous acts that cause emotional distress, which Section 411 defines as significant mental suffering or distress that may, but does not necessarily require medical or other professional treatment or counseling. The most vague and open to a spectrum of legal interpretation is Section 540E1, which states, a person who maliciously uses any service provided by a telecommunications service provider with intent to terrorize, frighten, intimidate, threaten, harass, molest, or annoy another person, or to disturb the peace and quiet of another person by doing any of the following is guilty of a misdemeanor. Now, there are felons that don't even have the 8-year probation period. The Tribune has researched dictionary definitions of domestic violence and has yet to encounter being annoying or disturbing the peace and quiet of another person as aspects of domestic violence. However, in Michigan today, if you do it over a telecommunications device, you are guilty of a domestic violence misdemeanor. So make sure you don't have an argument on the phone or on a Zoom call, especially a Zoom call. It's all being recorded, but Zoom calls for sure. AI actually are getting every Zoom call. They're giving it to the AI to analyze and perhaps copy. The list of actions that qualify a misdemeanor malicious use of telecommunication service includes shutting off or not paying for a domestic partner's telecommunication service, using vulgar, indecent, obscene, or offensive language through the use of a telecommunications device, and repeatedly calling and hanging up. Wow. All of these nonviolent misdemeanors are now considered, along with legitimately violent acts, to be domestic violence in the state of Michigan, and anyone convicted of them could have their firearms confiscated from them by force and will be unable to purchase or own any firearm or ammunition for 8 years after their conviction. Whitmer is likely not close to being done with what many believe are attacks against Michiganders' Second Amendment rights. She has yet to sign SB 83 to 86, which passed the House and Senate prior to the early adjournment this year and established a new type of court order called Extreme Protection Order, EPO. If Whitmer signs these bills into law, judges will be able to use EPOs to immediately confiscate firearms from someone determined to be a threat to themselves or others without a trial and with limited opportunity for defense. Fees for service of documents related to these orders are prohibited, making it easy and free for anyone to petition for an extreme protection order. Crazy. Our government coming after our rights, of course. Democrats unveil what NRA calls most sweeping gun prohibition bill of the 21st century. This just came out yesterday. The latest push to curb the Second Amendment rights comes in the form of Democrat-led bill that seeks to impose a sweeping firearms ban with exceptions that gun rights groups say are so fuzzy that the prohibition could prohibit nearly all semi-automatic handguns. The bill, dubbed the Gas-Operated Semi-Automatic Firearms Exclusion Act, Go Safe, that a gun rights group panned as perhaps the most sweeping gun prohibition bill of the 21st century, was introduced on November 29th by a number of Democrat senators along with an independent, with no Republicans joining. Generally, the key idea of the bill is to ban firearms that can be fired quickly, along with accessories that increase firing speed and have the ability to accept magazines with a capacity of 10 rounds or more, all in a bid to limit a firearm's ability to inflict maximum harm in a short amount of time. The bill's co-sponsor was Martin Henrich of NM. Why am I blanking? Please let me know. What is NM? I should know this, and once you say it, I'll be like, yeah, duh. So, said in a statement that the measure seeks to help those firearms that are inherently dangerous and unusually lethal, designed for a maximum unusually lethal. Guns are lethal. Define unusually lethal. Designed for maximum harm out of the hands of those who pose a threat to themselves or others. Gun control groups every town hailed the measure as innovative, while the NRA called it perhaps the most sweeping gun prohibition. Okay. So, yeah. Pretty much, that's all that I really wanted to share out of that one. We need to watch out for that. Make sure we keep our eye out. But what can we do to stop it? I don't know. Just don't give up your guns. That's all I have to say. Don't give up your guns. Definitely do not sell them in a buyback program. I think that's all I have for the gun grab that both the federal government and the Michigan state government are trying to oppose upon us. Next up, we have fact-checking Governor Whitmer's 100% energy law. We're going to talk about the Green New Steel and, energy for the next 45 minutes or so.
I signed game-changing climate and clean energy legislation. But what do the numbers say? Well, let's dig in.
That's a great idea, Governor. What do the numbers say? Let's dig in.
Makes Michigan a top 5 state for climate action and #1 in the Midwest.
So there's no doubt that her climate legislation puts us at the lead of the pack for imposing green energy mandates on the average person. But what that does is increase the risk of blackouts and decrease reliability and increase costs. That's hardly something to brag about.
It'll save families an average of $145 a year on their utility bills.
That's completely wrong. Our modeling shows that the average Michigan family will pay between $1,500 a year and $2,750 a year, which works out to $125 a month to $230 a month more in additional energy costs.
It'll create 160,000 good-paying clean energy jobs.
Even the New York Times doesn't buy that line about green jobs. The New York Times describes these green jobs as more akin to working in an Amazon factory or driving an Uber, where workers face long hours, limited benefits, no unions, and low pay. And the number the governor cited of 160,000 jobs came from a green energy firm study that, first off, didn't release its methodology, and secondly, said it was 158,000 job years, not 160,000 jobs.
And it helps us compete for nearly $8 billion federal tax dollars from President Biden's Inflation Reduction Act.
And this is where it always comes down to with big government tax and spend politicians. It's worth asking yourself the same question President Reagan asked a few years back. Are you better off today than you were 4 years ago? Because you're paying the bill for these $8 billion in spending from the Inflation Reduction Act. You always pay the bill for this kind of government spending.
Taking climate action is good for people's pockets, our communities, our economy, and our future.
And this is the biggest misrepresentation in the governor's short video, because we've already described how the plan will pick your pockets. At the same time, it will lead to reduced reliability of your electric service, leading to blackouts for as long as 61 hours in January, when Michigan residents need reliable electricity the most. And then the worst part, to add insult to injury, this energy law will do effectively nothing to protect the climate. By the year 2100, if this bill is enacted and passed exactly as the governor expects, it could reduce average world temperatures by as little as 1/1000th of a degree Celsius. That's not even enough for most thermometers to measure. And the last bit on this is that if this plan was so great, it wouldn't have to be mandated. Energy mandates don't create jobs, and they don't lead to lower prices. They do the opposite. They kill jobs and raise prices.
That was from the Mackinac Center. I think they do really good work over there. If you haven't heard, unfortunately, DTE just bumped their prices. I think $6 a month or something. I have an article here, but I'm going to give you some good news really quick. The good news is the Public Service Commission ruling on the Line 5 tunnel is a small pre-holiday win for Michiganders. So they have decided to build the new infrastructure for the Line 5 pipeline. The people of Michigan have one energy win they can look to as they go into the weekend. This was written December 3rd. This week has been a difficult one for Michigan residents as Governor Whitmer signed her extreme net zero energy bills into law, leaving Michiganders with dual specter of spiking electricity prices and impending electric grid instability. Now, tomorrow I am going to be talking finally about the Biden rural playbook and how that's going to affect us. Next week, Tuesday, I am doing the Michigan Strategic Fund board meeting. I'm hoping to get the Michigan Healthy Climate video out before I go on my 2-week. I'm going to do a 2-week break for the holiday. And probably I'm not going to post any, or at least I'm not going to be scheduled to post any for the last 2 weeks of the month. But the Michigan Healthy Climate bill needs to be dove into, and so I will be getting that out as soon as possible. On the heels of the governor's blackout bills becoming law, state regulators at the Michigan Public Service Commission appear to get a jump on pushing prices higher as they approved a $368.1 million rate increase for DTE customers. The optics of a rate hike falling a few days after the passage of the law and a few weeks before Christmas can't be ignored. The average household that is forced to rely on DTE for its electric service will soon see a $6.51 monthly increase in its utility bill. On a more positive note, state residents were thrown one pre-Christmas bone to go with those two Grinchy letdowns. In a separate ruling, the MPSC gave a green light to a much-needed state permit, partially clearing the way for Enbridge Energy to begin building the Line 5 tunnel. Enbridge will need additional approvals from the state-level Mackinac Straits Corridor Authority and the U.S. Army Corps before it can start work on the tunnel, which will improve the safety of a valuable pipeline. I'm very surprised that they're doing this. I hope that it will lead to reliable energy. I mean, obviously, here in Michigan, I think it's like 70% of people use natural gas to heat their homes. So it's really important that we have this pipeline, but it doesn't go along with their plans. And so I am concerned that some kind of trickery is afoot. But for now, let's take some good news as we can, right? They're building the pipeline, Line 5 infrastructure. So that is a win. Zoltan the Man Space Stream, yes. Next Wednesday on Rumble. It'll be my last scheduled stream for the month, but I will be talking about space. So hopefully you can hang out next Wednesday, 10 a.m. over on Rumble. Should be a fun one. Talking about Tesla, sending his car out there to space, allegedly, and all that jazz. So if you're interested in NASA and the Operation Paperclip and all that, please come hang out next Wednesday over on Rumble. All right, so the consultants at PLG recommend exactly those options. Better go up. The commission's order even mirrors past Mackinac Center statements when it points out that without the pipeline's operation, suppliers would need to use higher risk and costlier alternative fuel supply sources and transportation for Michigan customers, including those who use propane for home heating. The consultants at PLG recommend exactly those options, as their report promotes increased waterborne deliveries and crude by rail shipments as existing infrastructure that could potentially offset all but 13% of Line 5's crude shipments. Previous Mackinac Center publications explained that the Line 5 pipeline was built in 1953 to drastically reduce the amount of oil and gas traveling on the Great Lakes in tankers. In fact, the state of Michigan asked Bechtel Court to build the pipeline since tankers have a higher rate of accidents than pipelines. Michiganders have seen substantial energy setbacks over the past week. Rising electricity rates and the threat of Whitmer's green energy mandates have paired with rising inflation to cast a pall over holiday preparations. We can take heart in one piece of good pre-holiday news that government regulators may soon allow the state to retain one piece of essential energy infrastructure that supplies affordable fuel for backup generators. So at least we have that for some holiday cheer. And maybe you should get a backup generator for your significant other for Christmas if you don't have one already. Because we are all going to need it, unfortunately. Talking about the Green New Steel. You were already aware that Biden administration has been vacuuming up massive amounts of your money and doing it out of so-called green energy operatives, so Joe can claim to be saving the planet. We only recently learned that he had grabbed hundreds of millions more under a bogus invocation of the War Powers Act. I didn't know that. But have you looked into the specifics of precisely who is benefiting from this bonanza? Fortunately, some people have been paying attention, and the receipts of all this money include some rather dubious figures. One of them is a solar energy company called Sonova Energy. They were the recipients of a $3 billion federal contract in 2020. Linked to Tesla, by the way. But an investigation has shown that they have been scamming elderly dementia patients by getting them to sign multi-decade solar panel contracts costing tens of thousands of dollars. Yes, people with dementia sign contracts down in Texas that should not have been signing contracts. Getting the state to take action against predatory practices can be challenging. Fighting companies like Sonova in court is no easy feat because they can rely on a defense-based let the buyer beware. So buyer beware laws. In order to prove that the transaction was fraudulent, you would need to be able to show that the salesperson was fully aware that the customer had diminished capacities to the point where they couldn't legally enter into such a binding agreement. Even in the case of the elderly and infirm, Sonova could claim they believed in good faith that the customers simply intended to pass the solar panels on to the next generation, and they weren't obligated to dig into people's personal details. So people can't sell their home, unfortunately, or their home price is diminished because they were forced to pay a $40,000 lease for solar panels before they could sell their property. And again, they were getting dementia patients to sign the dotted line. So we need to be careful once again and make sure that our elderly are taken care of. But how do we stop such corrupt activities? Why would somebody do that? Why would somebody sell solar panels to a dementia patient? It's so corrupt and evil. I have a couple more things I want to share with you. Must watch. This is a rare 1991 video that shows David Rockefeller advocating for depopulation on the planet. 1994 annual UN Ambassadors Dinner. David Rockefeller calls for the reduction of the world's population. The clip gets even more concerning when he references the year 2020. Well, let's check it out.
We all face. Let me illustrate. Improved public health has caused the world's infant mortality rate to decline by 60% over the last 40 years. In the same period, the world's average life expectancy has increased from 46 years in 1950s to 63 years today. This is a development which, as individuals, we can only applaud. However, the result of these positive measures is a world population that has risen during the same short period of time geometrically to almost 6 billion people and could easily exceed 8 billion by the year 2020. The negative impact of population growth on all of our planetary ecosystems is becoming appallingly evident. In particular, the rapid growing exploitation of the world's supply of energy and water is a matter of deep concern, and the toxic byproducts of widespread industrialization have increased atmospheric pollution to dangerous levels. Unless nations will agree to work together to tackle these cross-border challenges posed by population growth, overconsumption of resources, and environmental degradation, the prospects for a decent life on our planet will be threatened. The recent UN meeting in Cairo is appropriately focused on one of these key issues, population growth. But the controversies which have erupted at the conference illustrate the problem of coming to grips with issues that are deeply divisive and which have a profound moral dimension. The United Nations can and should play an essential role in helping the world find a satisfactory way of stabilizing world population and stimulating economic development in a manner that is sensitive to religious and moral considerations. Economic growth is, of course, an inevitable corollary of a growing population and is essential to improved standards of living. But without careful coordination, unrestrained economic growth poses further threats to our environment. This was a major subject of discussion at the conference in Rio de Janeiro on the environment 2 years ago. The focus then was on sustainable growth and global development. It was pointed out at the conference that growth is most efficiently managed by the private sector, but regulation of the process by national governments and international bodies is also needed. And once again, the United Nations should certainly be among the catalysts and coordinators of this process. But in addition, given the importance of unencumbered international trade in stimulating and facilitating economic growth, some of the newer economic entities, such as the European Economic Community, NAFTA, APEC, and most importantly, GATT, now known as the World Trade Organization, are probably best suited to play a major role in ensuring sustainable development. And
Yep, the United Nations can and should play an essential role in helping the world find a satisfactory way of stabilizing the world population, Rockefeller says. It's important to listen to this entire clip to understand how they plan to accomplish this, utilizing both the private sector and government bodies, public-private partnerships. This should tell you everything you need to know about what's going on. Well, maybe not everything you need to know, but it tells you a lot. It tells me a lot. Thank you. I appreciate it. I try to bring stuff to you guys that maybe you don't get a chance to see. Again, it's always my goal here is just one thing at least. So if I did actually accomplish my goal and there was one story here that you had no idea of, please let me know. I love to know exactly what kind of information you like to know about that perhaps you don't get to see a lot. So let me know. This is the last thing that I wanted to share with you today. The Michigan tries to force Christian school to hire anti-Christian teachers, but the school is fighting back. Several groups from diverse religious and philosophical backgrounds have united in support of a Grand Rapids-based parish, its Catholic school, and several of the school's families in front of the court briefs filed with the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Sixth Circuit in Sacred Heart of Jesus Parish versus Nestle. Alliance Defending Freedom attorneys representing Sacred Heart of Jesus Parish and its school, Sacred Heart Academy, are asking the Sixth Circuit to protect the school's constitutionally protected freedom to operate as a religious school. The Michigan legislature recently amended the Michigan Civil Rights Act to cover sexual orientation and gender identity, but provided no protection for religious organizations that believe marriage between one man and one woman and the immutability of sex support human flourishing. The missing protections means that the change to the law requires Sacred Heart of Jesus Parish and its school, Sacred Heart Academy, to hire faculty and staff who lead lives in direct opposition to the Catholic faith, speak messages that violate church doctrine, and decline to articulate Catholic beliefs in teaching students and when advertising the school to prospective students or job applicants. The amendment also threatens the right of parents, including the 3 families who have joined the lawsuit, who specifically chose to send their school to Sacred Heart Academy because the school aligns with their values and religious beliefs. I mean, it's just like the government should not be in business, the government shouldn't be in church. Just leave them alone. The fact that they shut down churches and left strip clubs open in 2020, 2021, 2022 spoke volumes to me. Oh, and of course you can go buy marijuana, but you couldn't go to church. I was shocked that we allowed all that to go on. As a federal court concluded in another case involving a Catholic social service organization, this sort of illegitimate targeting creates a strong inference that the state's real target is the religious beliefs of the Catholic Church and not discriminatory conduct, said ADF Senior Counsel and VP of Appellate Advocacy John Bursch. Here, Michigan is forcing Sacred Heart to make an unconstitutional and unconscionable choice between teaching and practicing the Catholic faith or closing their doors forever, while denying parents the right to direct the upbringing and education of their children. Sacred Heart has faithfully served Grand Rapids families for more than a century, and its schools provides a rich academic and spiritual environment for hundreds of children. We and the groups that have filed briefs in support of our clients are urging the Sixth Circuit to allow their lawsuit to continue so they can take steps towards serving the community without fear of government punishment. Sacred Heart has also received front of the court support and brief from the Billy Graham Association. Samaritan's Purse, Concerned Women for America. Samaritan. The Family Foundation, Illinois Family Institute, International Conference. Okay, so basically, people are fighting back. This is what needs to be done. This school should be able to do what they want to do and teach the children how they want to teach them. Oh, sorry, I have one more clip that I think that you're really going to enjoy, and this one's only 28 seconds long. So, green lockdowns. This guy found something that we all need to know about.
MasterCard and the United Nations are joining forces to monitor the carbon effect of your credit card purchases. And then you'll hit your carbon max and it'll stop working. Hey, of course, it's voluntary for now. The new credit card is called Doconomy. And on the back of the card, it's going to say, I am taking responsibility for every transaction I make to help protect the planet. This is a social credit score, and it's a proof of concept. The Doconomy CO2 credit card website claims it is the largest initiative ever taken by a bank in educating its users on the impact of consumption. They say themselves they want to set a global standard for carbon calculations. That's the key. Once they have their numbers in place, then they can give every single purchase you make a score and punish you directly. This is what China does. And of course, this will only be enforced on you and me and any businesses that don't go along with their scheme. And banks are going to enforce it. MasterCard and the United Nations are joining forces to monitor the carbon.
Okay, pause that. And that reminded me of this one. So I said one more. I misspoke. Here is one more. But that is concerning, right? MasterCard, we know it's coming. We know what they have planned. They want a carbon footprint. They want us to have the central bank digital currency and the digital ID, and it's all United Nations plans. It's all one world government crap. But they're, again, copying China. So this individual is, let's see, China imprisoned 30 million people in quarantine camps. So this person covers nothing but China news. And so if you are on Twitter, I recommend following them.
Let's take the example of WeChat. WeChat started as a messaging app. Then it transformed into Chinese Facebook.
Real quick, WeChat is an all-in-one, and Elon Musk is trying to make Twitter just like it.
And then it added a ride-hailing service similar to Uber to its platform. And then it added banking services to its platform, and now you can use it as an ID. If you're living in China, you can file for divorce through this app. This will make your life very convenient, but at the same time, it also becomes very convenient for state security to track you. To combat message interceptions, they talk through emojis. A half-fallen rose means someone has been arrested. A dark moon means they're going to prison camps. A sun emoji means they are alive, and a flower means they have been released. Now combine cyber surveillance with Skynet, you get unimaginable power and control over 16% of the world's population. China calls it the social credit system. Whatever you do from the moment you wake up to the moment you go to bed is recorded. Based on your actions, your social credit score increases or decreases. If you praise the government publicly, donate blood, help the poor, engage in charity work, etc., your score increases.
By the way, donating blood, I think I did one video on it, but that is a racket. They are selling your blood for plasma. So you donate it, it's not going to people. I think like under 10% actually goes where you think it's going to go. The rest of it is sold for science. It's sold for vaccines. It's the blood market. Their blood magic is real. It's still going on. It's just changed, unfortunately. So don't donate blood.
If your score is high, you'll get tax breaks, free gym, preference at hospitals, and if you do something which is considered to be wrongful by the government, the opposite happens. Due to the social credit system, people fail to look at the bigger picture as they are constantly busy improving their scores to avail the benefits which come with it. The ratings for every Chinese citizen are publicly available, and anyone can see them, completely eradicating their privacy and ruining their social life. If you raise your voice against the government, your score would decrease, and other people wouldn't know why your score is low. They might think it's low because you did something wrong, so they'd want to stay away from you. Soon, due to the fear of lower ratings and what others would think about them, similar to what happens on social media, citizens will refrain from any kind of independent expression, both on social media and real life, as this might lead to lower ratings, leading to a denial of basic human rights for them. The complete eradication of privacy helps the authorities to quash movements and protests against the government before they even start. According to many, China's mass surveillance is a grave new threat to freedom of expression and a violation of fundamental human rights.
Absolutely. And then this also talks about 15 seconds, but within 500 meters radius of someone who are blacklisted on the social credit system, they'll alert you to stay away from them. Yeah, so it just giving you a list of in all these different areas of people that you need to stay away from. China shames citizens who are on the social credit blacklist by displaying their faces, ID, addresses on every government-run billboard for all to see. This also alerts who you may want to stay away from, lest your social credit score goes down. Shame citizens who are on the blacklist, right? The social credit system works until people figure out that those with the highest scores are non-thinking zombies, and that people with low scores are the empathetic, honest, trustworthy, and interesting people. Carlett said, I didn't know the shaming. Wow. Yes, I know. It's so much is going on over there, and that's why I will continue to say I have nothing against the Chinese people. I feel sorry for them. They're a fellow human being that has a tyrannical, out-of-control government that's watching their every move and destroying their livelihoods if they don't do what the government wants them to. It's nuts. So I'm just against their government. I'm not against them, obviously.
In crossing, there's a couple of cameras and a screen that shows you what the cameras can see. Once it has picked up that you were crossing illegally, it takes a picture and puts your face on the big screen like so. Using facial recognition, the authorities will know exactly who you are and will be able to give you a fine for jaywalking. Do they have anything like this where you live? Right now,
not yet. Not yet. But I don't know if you watched my video from last week. All of the ramps on US 131 in Grand Rapids have cameras on them now. So when you're going off the ramp, there's a camera looking at your license plate. So they get to know where you're going. And again, data is the new oil. And so as much data as they can collect, they're going to. And so that means cameras are going to be more and more intrusive. Which, quick side note, Teslas have 6 cameras inside of them. I mean, obviously it depends on the model, but at least 6. So what do you think all that footage is going to? Who do you think it's going to? It's going to the cloud, right? Which is just somebody else's computer. It's just a bunch of information that they're collecting on you to sell you things or to use against you in the future when you do something that they don't want you to do. That's a crazy time. Again, no fear. Love your neighbor. We're here to observe what's going on. That is why I share all this information with you. We need to know what's happening so that we can prepare as best we can. But again, and I'm not saying this to be doom and gloom. I feel like there is no way to stop it. It's kind of fate. But what you do in this planned, whether God planned it or what have you, what you do is all you can control, right? So just tell the truth, love your neighbor, be good to your family and yourself. Take care of yourself. I love you guys, and I thank you for hanging out with me. Tomorrow, again, the Biden rule playbook. I'm going to finally do my deep dive into that. And we got a couple questions. Zoltan the man, do you think the Chinese are much more accepting of this stuff and they really aren't bothered? Overall, I would say that they probably are more used to it, because if that's all you know, if you don't know any better, then you can't compare. So I definitely think that Eastern cultures are more accepting of authoritarianism. But I also think that there are so many people in that country that want to live free, especially since it opened up, right? Since China has opened up to the West, I think that our ideas have flooded into their country just as much as their ideas have flooded into ours. Well, maybe not just as much, but I definitely think that they get information from the West more since China has opened up and started the Silk Road 2.0, basically. So that was a great question. I think it's mixed. And slavery never ended for any group. You're right. Unfortunately, it's just changed in nature. Now we have debt slavery. But thank you. I appreciate you guys. Again, I also want to say I have reached 500. I want to thank each and every one of you. It's a big milestone. I've never spoken in front of 500 people before, so I am super happy with all the progress this channel has made, and I hope to just keep improving and getting better, and maybe, narrowing down narrowing down the topics. I'm not sure, but you guys let me know. What do you like to hear about the most? Industry 4.0, the jabs, let me know. I love your guys' feedback, and I will see you tomorrow at 10 a.m. Peace out.